This is our Dean Speaker Series, and is hosted by the UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School and the Frank Hawkins Kenan Institute of Private Enterprise. I'm Doug Shackelford, Dean of the Business School, and we are delighted to have you today join us to hear from Jason Liberty, who is the Executive Vice President and CFO for the Royal Caribbean Group. We're honored to have Jason as part of the Dean Speaker Series. The Dean Speaker Series is made possible through the generous support of the Archie K. Davis Endowment. The series was created to bring outstanding scholars and leaders from business, education, and government to share thoughts and insights with the school, the university, and the community at large. And Jason is going to be a tremendous representative of that. He joined Royal Caribbean in 2005. It's the world's second largest cruise line operator and owns 3 cruise lines: Royal Caribbean International, Celebrity Cruises, and Silver Sea Cruises. I'm going to read a few of Jason's responsibilities, but you'll see that basically he's responsible for everything except, I think, motoring the ships around. He's got treasury, accounting, corporate strategy and revenue planning, corporate development, IT, supply chain, risk management, legal, port operations, deployment, internal audit, and investor relations. So he is a busy person, but we're glad he joins us. This is a little bit of a welcome back. He is a graduate of our MBA program, and Jason sort of embodies the perfect alum because he is very involved with the school. He serves on our board of advisors. He's been very involved with our students from STAR projects, conferences. For me, he is just a very good friend, and we have talked regularly. And I'm going to sort of pick this up where we were the last time we were physically together. Jason and his son came up, and they came to the Duke Carolina basketball game in February of 2020 with my wife and me. And it's total bedlam in the Smith Center, as Duke Carolina basketball games are. And at some point in there, I said to Jason, I know you have operations in China. What's going on with this thing called the coronavirus? And Jason says to me something like, it's 5 times worse than everything that's being reported. And I remember after the game thinking, if it's 5 times worse than everything that's being reported now, this is before it's gotten to the US and everything. I started trying to think, this is really bad for poor Jason and Royal Caribbean, but it didn't really strike me the full implications of what he had said, because we had just been in a building with 22,000 people all crawling over each other, yelling and screaming. And of course, it would only be less than a month before we wouldn't be in school together. There wouldn't be any more ball games. And Jason would be with Royal Caribbean going on a cruise of sorts, financially and operationally, that I asked him if he would share with us today. So I've got a few questions for Jason, but he's going to field a lot of questions from the floor. Feel free to submit questions at any time in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. But welcome, Jason. It is great to see you virtually, and welcome back to Carolina, even if it is on a Zoom screen.
Thanks, Doug. Really happy to be here, and thanks everybody for showing up today and listening to our story.
So let's sort of pick up back there at the basketball game. Obviously, if we think back, the cruise industry was one of the first ones that got hit. Tons of negative publicity. And this was before we realized everybody's going to be affected. Every industry is going to be affected. Walk us through those early decisions that you had to go through, the company had to go through, and what were you thinking as in some sense, the business shut down? And what were these early decisions that you had to make?
Yeah, sure. Well, it certainly was an episodic situation. Coming out of that basketball game, I think I was talking about the underreporting of the statistics out of China. Right. And of course, it escalated there and across the world very quickly. very soon we found ourselves shutting down our entire business. So you can imagine a business that we've spent well over 40 years building, generating well over $10 billion a year in revenue, $3.5 billion in operating cash flow, to all of a sudden one day, that music went on pause. And so I kind of describe it as you can prepare yourself for a hurricane. It's pretty difficult to prepare yourself for a meteor. The first thing I did, which would any good MBA student would do, is I went back to my notes to see where in the MBA playbook you would pull the play from in terms of what do you do when you're not operating and you're not generating any revenue, your business relies a lot on negative working capital because our customers provide customer deposits, and all of a sudden people want their money back because their vacation experience is not happening, and we don't know when that vacation experience is going to occur again. What I would say very early on, a few things were really obvious to us. Having a very strong balance sheet, which we had, being investment grade credit, having unencumbered assets, and really strong relationships with our banking group and investor group, paid huge dividends for us. We had to immediately look at how do you go from looking at a P&L and a balance sheet all the time where you're forecasting those details to really focusing on real cash flow, not cash flow statements, but what exactly, how is our cash going to burn, and what actions do we need to take in order to deal with that? Some of those actions are raising capital, which of course during that time, as you can imagine, nobody was really lending money, and so we found creative ways with our banking group to be able to do that, which put us in a much stronger liquidity position, that really did not put us in a desperate situation to raise capital, which he kind of played out through the course of the year. You look at dilution, we have dramatically diluted our shareholders considerably less than our competitors. We had a pretty robust capital expenditure program. We're in a capital intensive business. And so we immediately put almost all of that on hold. And then, we took our burn rate down in terms of what we were spending in order to minimize the cash burn on our business. And all of that had to be done within really a 30-day period of time. It was very swift and quick, and as you can imagine, some people, their heads in terms of when we were going to return were all over the place. Some people thought this would just be a couple weeks. Some people thought, okay, maybe it's a couple months. And so getting people to understand that you really have to position yourself or put your posture in more of a worst case scenario, longer term, and getting people to realize that took us a couple weeks. And then once people realized that, we were able to pretty quickly get ourselves into the position that we wanted to be in. The other point I'll just add is, I think that actions the government took, especially the Fed took, once we kind of got through that first tranche of liquidity requirements, really loosened up the capital markets, and allowed companies, especially like ours, that were at the epicenter of this crisis, to access the capital markets, not at the investment grade levels that we were before, but enough to be able to kind of get the flywheel started on the capital side to be able to ensure that we can get on the other side of this.
Jason, you mentioned something and I know we have talked about this over the last year or so, relationships that that Royal Caribbean had made over a long time period, that those really were critical. Can you elaborate on how relationships mattered in this particular situation you found yourself in?
Yeah. So we've had, because of we are a very capital intensive business. We have a pretty large banking group, as an example. We have a pretty sophisticated investment group, investors that invest in us. And we have, I think, for a very long time, just philosophically, tried to treat everybody like a partner, not as a commodity, right? So we weren't bidding out, our financings in the past. We would, make sure we're rotating and understanding what was important to our banks. And so when it came time, the bank group, our bank group, really came together and they picked us, right? They could have picked any of our competitors. They picked us to lend the money to straight from the bank, which creates great risk for them. But I think when you treat people, your stakeholders with respect and as a partner, plus you've got incredible brands, great assets, a great business. People start to make their choices on where they're going to bet, and for us, we were, I think, fortunate. Though I think our bank group would have said it. Well, it's not a no-brainer in a situation like that. They knew who was the company to bet on, and they did that, and that paid huge dividends, as I said, for our cost of capital as well as for our shareholders, who we've had to dilute a little bit through some equity raises, but nowhere near to the extent that our competitors have.
I think that's a great takeaway from this whole thing, is just how, relationships only matter when they matter, and then they really matter when they matter.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that you've been operating one cruise ship in Singapore and a few in Europe and the Middle East lately. Tell me what you've learned from that as far as getting back on a regular footing globally, and where do things look now looking forward?
Yeah. Well, we, as you said, Doug, every part of the world looks at COVID a little bit differently. In Europe, as an example, they really look at cruising as an extension of society, not as kind of a different country, like maybe how the U.S. currently looks at the cruise industry. And then, there are countries that had extraordinary efforts, like Singapore, which really controlled the virus very, very early on. And so, we working with a panel of experts, which includes the former head of HHS and the former head of the FDA, put together a set of protocols, because we knew that going back in to service, we wanted to make sure that, especially in a period of time in which COVID is still prevalent in society, that we could be the safest place on earth, right? Much safer than you walking down Main Street and so forth. So we started off with a series of voyages, actually out of Saudi for Saudis with our Silver Sea brand. And it included testing of guests before they get on the ship, testing of guests when they get off the ship, social distancing, capacity at lower levels. And those protocols began to then also roll out to our TUI Cruises brand and our Hapag-Lloyd brand, which are our German premium and ultra luxury lines. And we saw, same thing with, that the protocols were working. The level of COVID on our ships was de minimis. And when we did have a case, because it is in society, our ability to abate spread was dramatically better than anything you see happening on land. And then, as you noted, we're in Singapore, and we've been operating there now for months. We've had well over 150,000 guests sail with us, and it's a fraction of a fraction in terms of COVID relative to what you're hearing in any type of reporting on land. We've also announced 9 other ships coming online that are going to be sailing out of the Bahamas and St. Martin, Haifa, Israel, Greece, and so forth, under those protocols, and in some cases, having vaccinated cruises, as we kind of sort this thing out. And so, I think the early days of this virus, nobody knew exactly what to do. Our competitor had an unfortunate set of circumstances very early on that I think perception-wise made it seem like the cruise world was more susceptible to disease and other things. In reality, because of things like norovirus and so forth, our sanitation protocols were as world class as, I mean, you couldn't find something like it on land. And so, things like HVAC systems, blowing fresh air, we built our ships that way, in terms of our sanitation practices. So a lot of this was just evolving, better communication around it, and testing was also important. So the flywheel is starting for us, and so there's definitely going to be cruising taking place here in June, and we're working with the CDC and the U.S. government to get the flywheel started with cruising out of places like South Florida and Texas and other locations around the U.S.
How difficult is it to start back up a ship when things have been shut down for months? Get a crew back and get operations up and flowing.
Yeah, so getting our crew home was not easy, for sure, especially during times where the understanding on how to handle COVID was very challenging. Certainly, look, we have 75,000 plus employees. The vast majority of them are on the water. We have maintained really strong dialogue with them, so we're communicating with them on a regular basis. We've also had about a year to understand how we were going to bring up 60 ships as soon as possible. So it comes with, extraordinary challenges, because we typically bring up about 3 ships a year, new ships. So bringing up that many is going to be a significant task, which I think we have the plans for, and we're ready to go. But it's positioning the ships, making sure people are being tested, kind of going through what is possible on a vaccination standpoint. It's something that we're seriously taking a look at and considering, and getting the flywheel started. It's I think a lot of this is momentum building. I think fortunately this will not be a light switch. It will be a dial as we kind of ramp up capacity, and so that alleviates a little bit of the pressure in terms of bringing the crew on. The other point I'll make, Doug, is that we made a decision early on that we wanted to keep the ships in a warm state. It's a little bit like the body, right? If you just put a body in a living being body in a recliner for a year, the answer when you try to step out of that recliner is not going to be a good answer. So we've kept the body moving during this period of time, minimal crewing, but making sure that the pipes and all the things that work on a cruise ship work effectively. We've been doing that this entire time, and so we made other trade-offs in terms of our burn rate versus putting our ships in a state that could be very costly and somewhat unpredictable as we bring the fleet back up and running.
That's very interesting. So I know that over some time now, the industry has been moving toward bigger ships, more amenities, that sort of direction. Is that where you see it continuing once we get on the other side of this?
Yeah, I think we do. Obviously we're constantly surveying our guests. Our guests, especially multi-generational, they continue to look at having the activities and the experiences both on the ship and off the ship that they had before. Now we, of course, across our brands, if you go on our Silver Sea brand, we have ships that are 100 passengers and we have ships that are 600 passengers. And then, of course, on our Royal brand, we have ships that go up into the mid 5,000 passenger. But I think the point to really bring is that it's a lot of it comes down to the public space per passenger, and we have since the beginning, we over-index on the amount of public space per guest. And so while the number of people might sometimes sound high, the reality of these ships are significant in size, and there's a lot of space for them to be able to, our passengers to be able to do their activities without being kind of overly tight or feel like they can't social distance. So for us, social distancing, we feel, is very doable. If you go back to the voyages that we've already operated, it's interesting that consistently the net promoter scores on those ships average 6 to 7 points higher than
Wow.
they did pre-COVID. And so we've been able to put on the experience as people would expect them to be. And I also think that people appreciate more, being out on the water, fresh air, seeing other experiences, which have been really great. I think the thing that we'll see how it sorts out is how the consumer will travel coming out of this. I think it's very likely that the guests will want to stay a little bit more closer to home, right? So, the consumer had really grown to be much more globally minded.
Right.
And so, there's going to be a little bit of time where they're going to have to warm themselves back up to, traveling anywhere and everywhere in the world. Fortunately for us, our sourcing is global. Our ships are very mobile. And so our ability to flex to that is generally easy for us to do.
Yeah, your quote, fixed assets are not very fixed.
That's right.
So I've got a question here sort of about the balance sheet. Your debt has increased during the pandemic. And I understand you just had a recent $1.5 billion share sale. Where do you see things going now as far as debt, your equity? You see this coming down, some restructuring in the future, or are you fairly comfortable with where you are now as you look out into the future?
Yeah. So on a liquidity standpoint, we feel we're in a really good position. We have we're now as we start to see the fog is beginning to clear. Customers, it's also clearing for the customers, and so customer deposits and so forth. We feel like we have a pretty good understanding on how that's going to continue to build. We're sitting on a significant amount of cash that we've raised over the past call it 3 to 6 months, and we're beginning to kind of turn the corner from focusing on liquidity to really focusing on repairing the balance sheet. Our goals as an organization is to get back to pre-COVID levels, whether that's EPS or ROIC or debt to EBITDA for the leverage standpoint, which for us, our target has been 3.5 times or better, as soon as possible. And so I think as we kind of begin to kind of turn that corner, we will begin to prioritize where that cash flow is going. And a lot of that will go to paying down our debt, and also refinancing some of the more expensive debt that we had to kind of put in place during the crisis. So we appreciate what I think we have a pretty good understanding what the right financial position of the organization should be. These are coordinates that really back in 2013, when I first became the CFO, we had all signed up for, we called it our double program, which was to double our earnings and get to double-digit ROIC and be an investment grade credit. And we did that in a very short period of time, and we continued on with that. And like I said, this is an episodic event, but that's kind of where the board and senior management and where we're steering the organization on a balance sheet and financial standpoint.
So I'm going to take a question from our participants. This person says, I know Royal Caribbean is sophisticated in terms of data-driven forecasting and pricing. How are you thinking about forecasting now? What data is relevant to demand going forward, or has the approach to forecasting fundamentally changed?
It's a great question, which I don't have a perfect answer for. We obviously, our yield management, we have really sophisticated systems, AI, incredible yield managers or pricing people who, we had a heavily working system that, used elasticity, used historical regression and so forth to help predict what was going to happen each and every day. And so a lot of that, we've had other crises before. And so we can kind of go back and look at those tracks and try to use that to help us predict better, what it's going to be like as we begin to recover. And then I think we feel in general that once we get to that flywheel, back to where not even back to where it starts to become more predictable, then we'll be able to apply a lot of that technology and historical capabilities to it. But I certainly in the beginning, in the forecast, we're used to really being plus or minus 1% on our revenue. Our earnings have been highly predictable, and we've kind of been able to manage to that. And it will take us a little bit of time to get back to that, and also to get ourselves off from just focus on forecasting cash to now moving ourselves back to forecasting profitability, or the P&L and the balance sheet and a cash flow statement. But it's going to be tricky, and it's we think a lot about it, and we have to get comfortable that there's going to be a level of variability until we get back to where we were before.
Question here about technology, and then just noting that you guys have used a lot in technology-based safety measures. How are you thinking about this with regards to consumer confidence, and how would you predict that sort of a digital transformation will affect your company or the whole industry going forward?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is, we didn't let a good crisis go to waste, right? So, when the car is not moving, the ability to change the tires or parts make it a little bit easier. We had set out about three and a half years ago on a digital transformation to take friction out of the guest and crew experience, take friction out of the booking process, and so there's a series of commerce tools, especially for like our onboard revenue activities, that we're now going to be rolling out as we come back into service. We've got our digital app, and we've reduced a lot of these friction points. And so some of the ships that we hadn't had a chance to roll the technology out onto, we've been able to do that during this period of time. We've also been able to use that footprint that we've created to help us with things like contact tracing. So one of the reasons why we see really incredible results, and we build confidence with a lot of these governmental agencies during COVID, is we have, working with partners, designed technology that allows us to do contact tracing, not in hours, but in minutes, through ocular technology and what we call the tracelets. And so, now, of course, we're also very focused on consumer privacy. So, we want it to be value add, not creepy. And so there's, a lot of things that we're looking to do to try to advance that. But, we are, if you were to ask pre-COVID, like, what were we obsessed about, especially in terms of where we could be disrupted, we were really focused on the digital or the commerce world, because we didn't want to be a product on Amazon's shelf or Google. We wanted to maintain brand identity and be kind of omni-channel in terms of how we go to market. And in order to do that, we have to stay very relevant commercially on the digital front. And so, it's something that's a major focus. We're a company that has a lot of legacy systems that we've also had an opportunity to kind of move some of the valves around during this period of time. But, the consumer's expectation, I think we will see a different way customers shop. Well, obviously for us will be different than it was pre-COVID, because the different generations have had the opportunity to buy things digitally. I mean, like my stepfather, I think about, who could barely turn on his iPhone, now can, he does Instacart and different Amazon related type of stuff. And so, will he be comfortable? Will he be comfortable booking a cruise online, while before he had to go through a travel agent? That some of that's going to change, and we certainly feel we're ready for it, and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah. So our next question from the audience is definitely looking to the future. And this person points out that traditional automobile transportation is shifting toward an electric form. And they raise a question. I'm fascinated to hear your answer to it. Is it possible to build sustainable electric cruise ships in the same way that we seem to be rather rapidly moving toward battery driven automobiles?
Great, really, really good question. So the answer today is the technology is not there yet for us to be able to to propel and support effectively a floating city. But the technology is really evolving. We will be announcing several things here in the coming months about taking some serious steps towards being able to use battery and other very clean energy forms in order for us to be able to power our ships. We invest a lot in it. We continue to invest a lot in it. We are pushing as hard as we possibly can. But they are floating cities, and I don't think someone's going to get on a nuclear cruise ship anytime soon. So we're looking for other forms of energy to be able to do that, while at the same time, investing significantly to reduce the emissions that our ships yield. And we can do that in many ways, and a lot of that's by using technology and AI and so forth to come up with optimal systems and paths for our ships to go, which has made a significant change. I mean, we've reduced our carbon footprint by over 25% over the past several years through technology. We have goals for it to be, to continue very much down that path, and we're trying hard to solve for carbon neutrality, which today that technology is not there yet.
Wow, that's exciting to think about that world ahead.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about a car or a cruise ship. So here's another question we've got. Someone points out that they've seen some amazing content from a cruise ship captain who sort of provided a peek behind the curtain of what it takes to operate a ship. And they want to know, is there a strategy to sort of empower employees to be social media champions for your brand?
Absolutely. I mean, our greatest advocates are our crew and our guests. And so very much we try to empower them. Captain Kate is a juggernaut on her own. And, the head of our celebrity brand has really done such an incredible job to promote diversity on the ship, which, it's something you say, but it's hard, especially in the maritime world. There aren't a lot of female graduates coming out of maritime academies, and she's really focused on it. We've really focused on how do we set up an environment to be able to support that, and so having advocates like that, giving the behind the scenes, but also helping us promote diversity and try to attract that talent into our industry or into maritime, we think is really important. But for those that have taken cruises, and I hope most of you have, I mean, the crew make it all happen, and so they promote us every day in their home countries. They promote us every day when they're on the ship, it's important because I think it really shows a side of what because these cities, they're floating cities. So in cities, you have a society, and it really helps kind of give a perspective on their lives, as well as all the joy, right, they bring, right, fulfilling people's bucket lists.
Yeah, no, exactly. I've got a question, Jason. I know we've talked about this before, and I think our audience might be interested. So obviously, you got a lot of ships in the Caribbeans. In the fall, we have plenty of hurricanes come through. Do you sit there like I do and watch the Weather Channel and say, "Uh-oh, next week could be kind of a hairy week"? But how do you guys prepare for you got these ships all floating around in the middle of a hurricane?
Yeah, well, I think just starting on the last few words there, they're floating, right? And so most storm systems are they're only so wide. So these ships, because they're mobile, we're able to move them around, typically around all these storms, and it sometimes gets a little bit challenging when it's at a home port. When people are getting on and off the ship on the day of hurricane hitting. That's typically more where it impacts our guest, or we have to move something a couple days earlier, a couple days later. But we do follow it. We actually have a chief meteorologist who's got a huge personality, by the way. So he got his own little Instagram and Facebook following for those that want up to date on where our ships are and what the weather systems are that are around it. And our captains on our ships, as well as our chief meteorologists and all of us when hurricane season comes around, we're heavily focused on it. And because our ships are mobile and there are numerous destinations for us to be able to go, we're almost all the time able to fulfill an incredible vacation experience, even in the middle of a hurricane system coming through, because we're able to move people from going from one country to another country with ease.
Got some questions here about vaccines and vaccinations. If you're going to be taking a cruise on Royal Caribbean in the next few months, is going to be required to be vaccinated and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, we've announced so far for the voyages that are coming up here that will be taking Americans, like in the Bahamas and so forth, that we expect adults to be vaccinated. There's going to be this transition period while COVID is prevalent in society, where vaccinations are going to be an important factor. I think for us, the major focus on vaccination, which I think living here today in the U.S., we're very fortunate to see, is it's making a sizable impact on society as more and more vaccinations roll out and people are encouraged to be vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated now, and it's that in itself, just lowering the risk in society, taking the risk candidates off the table, which it has, or for a larger extent it has, really minimizes the risk of the disease in society. And of course, we are an extension of society, and we need to make sure that that we're helping, we're not hurting the situation. So we're currently promoting vaccination for adults on our ships, and a lot of this will kind of play out in terms of what the CDC and HHS will require here in the U.S. I can tell you internationally, it's not something that is looked upon to be a requirement. They feel the testing that we do is highly effective, and that's proven out to be the case. But vaccinations, I think, also helps loosen up the experience during this transitional period.
Got another question here from our audience. The person writes, the state of Florida recently sued the federal government and the Biden administration over the, quote, no sale order issued by the CDC last year. What's the position of Royal Caribbean on this particular action?
Well, I think our position is less about it being political. We feel that we have put out a set of protocols that we think are highly effective. We have an incredible amount of data and science that shows that those protocols work. As vaccinations roll out here and cases fall, everybody else in travel is able to operate, and we feel that it's important and correct for us also to be able to operate here. So really today, you think about travel, the only industry or sector that's not really allowed to go here in the U.S. Is cruise, and I think that's probably the point of the governor and other states and other representatives and local officials is, why are we just continuing to leave a company, a set of companies that have not operated for 13 months with science that shows the protocols work, and if you want vaccinations, you want everyone to be vaccinated, then and you say if vaccinations are effective, then just tell us what is the scenario that's necessary in order for us to be able to operate, because the demand is there. Our impact on these economies is significant. We've raised a lot of capital to keep jobs in these states, and we've helped our stakeholders also help them keep jobs here in states like Florida and Texas and Alaska and so forth. And we're just trying to do what we do best, which is deliver incredible experiences to people. And we think also travel and vacation is really important mentally to people. We've all been locked up. We're all, I'm sure, know people in our lives that, have had some real challenges, being in the, locked up in their fortress of solitude, as I am, again, still here today. And we think, travel and vacation and experiences done in a safe way, allows us, helps deal with a very difficult situation.
On that note, Jason, I would assume, but you tell me, I would assume that the cruising population is dying to get back on the ships. Is that the kind of demand that you guys are seeing building up? And do you expect that once you are fully back in operation that you're going to be booked up for some time?
Yeah, we've been really blessed, Doug, that our loyalty guests, people who have cruised before, people who who are loyal, who are loyalty members, have been incredibly supportive through this, and they are. Our call volumes are significant. Our bookings, while they're not what they were pre-COVID, like when we were operating regularly, are really encouraging. Whether it's pricing, whether it's our load factors, are in really strong and encouraging spots. So we know the demand is there, but our guests, some of them are just willing to keep moving it along, or in terms of waiting for us to, they're willing to book, and then if we move their voyage, they're okay, we'll just keep moving. And a lot of people are just looking for, okay, this is actually going to happen, so I can plan my family's vacation experience for this date and make my air arrangements or any arrangements in order to be able to put that on. So we're not concerned at all about demand. We just need to get back and get the flywheel started.
Jason, I expect that, if you roll back, you've probably learned enough to write multiple books over the last 13, 14 months. What is one lesson that you would say you've learned through this whole thing that, if we were actually in a room here and it was packed out with MBA students, what would you say? Here's the one thing I learned that I'll probably take with me the rest of my career, that this is really hammered home.
Yeah, well, the first point we talked about a lot, which is just how important relationships are. The other thing, I think the thing in which obviously the school promotes significantly is about leadership. During, in the dark hours, you really can tell those that have the fortitude and the leadership to kind of lead you out of that darkness. And I'm incredibly proud of my colleagues who either, immediately led or eventually got to a point where they understood where we needed to go. But I think first off, we all go through enterprise risk management, right? And we try to assess risk and so forth, and we think we get it right. I promise you, a global pandemic that was going to impact the world for now 13 months was not number one on our list, and it clearly has had the number one impact from us. So I think that really appreciating the velocity of how quickly risks can appear on your radar is something that I will certainly take away. I will certainly take away on the leadership element of that. And I also hope that at least for us, we will appreciate our business and our people more than we ever did before. I think we take things for granted. And I don't think we'll ever do that again.
Jason, I think I can say the very things about the school, leadership, appreciation for people, appreciation to be able to be together. And just earlier this week, I was talking with someone and I said, we do all this risk management at the university, considering if this happens, that happens. So then something really happens. We don't have anything on the shelf. We couldn't have written anything on the shelf, and you're making it up every day and pivoting 3 and 4 times a day, sometimes trying to figure out what do you do. But it really is a time in which you figure out, who are the leaders and who can take this and get us forward.
Doug, I think the other thing for the broader population here, if you're wondering if you could raise over $10 billion in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts in your home office, the answer is you can. Even if you're not generating any revenue, it actually can be done.
I think that sounds like something should be put on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
That's great. So we got some more questions popped up while I've been babbling there. How did your education at Carolina help prepare you for what you're doing right now? That's a great question.
Yeah,
I didn't even write that one, Jason.
it is a great. I mean, look, I think that at the end of the day, a few things that the Carolina education I think brought me. One is the focus on leadership and how important it is to organize yourself and be prepared to lead people, whether you're leading 10 people or whether you're leading 5,000 or 75,000 people. So being a great leader and developing your skills to be a great leader is really important. The second thing to me is an MBA, at least for me, gives you the breadth of the necessary content you need to make a very good decision. And so in situations like this or like any other and others, making sure that you're able to diligence the different dimensions of a business before proceeding with the decision or communicating things is an incredible value that I got out of business school, because just being a finance person or just being a marketing person, you can have the blinders on and you can end up making a decision that's not really the right decision. So I think having a multi-dimensional view for good decision making is invaluable. And then of course, the third, in which whether it's it goes back to the relationship point. Plenty of my cohort has through this time have been there for me. I mean, this has not been the easiest 12 months of my life for sure. And I think and for many of them as well. And I think being there together, having that strong Carolina bond, which is to me very unique. It's very genuine and humble. Has paid a lot of personal dividends. The other point I would just add, Doug, is we're littered with UNC grads. So they all stepped up and weren't looking for a trophy or a medal for their efforts. And humble leaders has really kind of shined through on those individuals as well.
To our audience, Jason has done a great job of hiring away some of our very best graduates. So we've got an increasingly tied relationship with Royal Caribbean, and we appreciate that. Another question popped up here. How do you think about mentorship in your career, either as a mentor or a mentee? And who was instrumental in helping you in your personal journey?
Yeah. So I'll tell you how I look at the mentor-mentee relationship. First off, I will say that 90% of the responsibility in a mentor-mentee relationship is on the mentee. The mentee really needs to take responsibility and accountability for their careers and for the skills that they want to develop. And to me, the mentor is kind of a little bit of like your board or your strategy in helping you develop what it is that you're looking to achieve. So I'm very active on the mentoring side. There are dozens of people inside Royal Caribbean and outside of Royal Caribbean that I spend time mentoring. And to me, people who care and want to get better and learn new things and be exposed to new things, I'm willing to do that all day long. And for those that have heard me speak before, I really push people on trying to make other people look like heroes. I think it's a really important skill because as you try to move up the chain, and people are evaluating you for promotion or for jobs or whatever it is, you're better off having a stadium full of people cheering for you than you just cheering for yourself. And so I talk a lot about that. That advice came from one of my key mentors, which was my predecessor at Royal Caribbean. I was this person who thought that I was the greatest thing, or the greatest gift to Royal Caribbean when I came from KPMG and needed some humbling for sure. And he made sure that I really saw the value and making others look like heroes. And that transformed my life and my career, and whether it's in the community or whether it's at the company, that has been key. But I've always looked towards great mentors. My boss today is an incredible mentor of mine. Several board members are board members outside of the company, who have been friends of mine or mentors of mine for the year. I would say that I also seek mentors that are not like me. You see great leaders who deliver great things. Learning from them and emulating how they do things it helps you be a stronger contributor to society and to the workforce.
I think we've got time for one last question here, and this one sounds like it might be coming from one of your customers. This person would like a little elaboration on some of the things you talked about reducing friction for guests. It said, you mentioned some of the digital transformation that you're working on, and just wanted to know specifically, are there new initiatives that are coming out that with regards to onboarding guests that people should anticipate seeing in the near future?
Yeah, well, certainly the cruise industry has lagged other travel industries. Like, for example, the amount of time you would typically wait an hour at least to get on and off of a cruise ship. You'd show up with 20 documents and so forth. And today, especially in our key turn ports, you're able to check in like you do for an airline and walk in and show us your barcode. We scan it. All your data immediately populates, whether it's your passport or credit card information. And our goal, and where we've invested in this technology, is for you we call it to go from car to bar within 15 minutes. And when you get off the ship, we want you to be able to get off in 10 minutes. And we've been able to do that through ocular technology with the CBP, the Border Patrol. So you can walk, you look at basically a screen, looks at your face, and then you're able to be cleared and be able to walk out. The other thing, which I think is really critical, is we've all been now calibrated for on-demand services. And so we want, while the cruise ship, for those that have done it, is a highly service-oriented business, right? You won't stay in a hotel that has the service level of a cruise ship, right? They're there at your beck and call. But, if you want to order something to eat, if you need a towel or whatever it is, instead of having to call or find somebody, being able to do it at the touch of your phone or your device, is just what's becoming expected. And so we want you to be able to navigate your experience. If you want to book a spa appointment, you should be able to book a spa appointment without having to walk down to the spa or make a phone call. If that appointment, as an example, is not available and it becomes available, we should be able to contact you and let you know that time slot. So this is stuff that is not overly complicated unless you're sitting on systems that are 25, 30 years old. And so, we're trying to transform all that.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense to me. Well, Jason, I so appreciate you joining us. I learned a lot every time I talk with you. And I know probably some of our audience today came into this thinking the cruise ship is places where, people with their canes somehow creep onto the ship and don't rock the boat too much so that they can maybe get a little sunshine during the cold winter months or something. But it's clearly a dynamic industry, and you and your team have done a remarkable job during what let's all hope is a once in a lifetime experience to not only keep Royal Caribbean strong throughout the process, but as you were pointing out, it's easier to change the tires when the car's not moving and then transform it to go forward. So thank you for this time, and thank you for everything you do for Kenan-Flagler throughout the year. And keep hiring our great students. And hopefully we got a few here that their ears might have perked up and they might be thinking that Miami wouldn't be the worst place for them to settle down.
Sounds great.
So as we move on, I want to thank all our audience for joining us. Terrific group today. A lot of great questions. Thank you. mark your calendars for our next Dean Speaker event, which will be on April 29th. We're going to have Anthony Fox. He is the LIFT Chief Policy Officer and advisor to the co-founders. He was the Secretary of Transportation under President Obama. And before that, he was the mayor of Charlotte. You can register for his talk and other upcoming Dean Speaker series on the Kenan Institute website. And that's at kenaninstitute.unc.edu/events. Kenan Institute. Yeah, that's it. So with that, I thank everyone for joining us. And I particularly thank Jason for joining us today with his insights on Royal Caribbean and the cruise industry. Thank you, everyone.